Ellen DeGeneres sat stiffly on a sleek black chair, her first television appearance since her talk show's abrupt end 2 years ago. Across from her, Karoline Leavitt leaned forward, her eyes glinting with barely concealed disdain. The set was stark, all sharp angles and cold lighting, amplifying the hostility that crackled between them. The host, a seasoned journalist named Clara Holt, barely had time to introduce the segment before Karoline launched her attack. "You fled the country." "Ellen," Karoline spat, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You packed your bags and ran the second Trump won the election. What kind of coward does that?" Her lips curled into a sneer, daring Ellen to respond. Ellen's jaw tightened, her fingers gripping the armrests. The audience, a mix of curious, onlookers and die-hard fans, shifted in their seats, sensing blood in the water. "I didn't run," Ellen said, her tone low but laced with defiance. "I left because I couldn't stomach living in a country that chose him again." "That's not cowardice, Karoline. That's principle." Karoline barked a laugh, loud and mocking. "Principle? You're a fool if you think anyone buys that. You hated Trump so much you abandoned your fans, your home, everything. You're not principled. You're spineless." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "And stupid, too, for thinking you could hide forever." The accusation landed like a slap. Ellen's face flushed, but she held Karoline's gaze. "You don't get to call me stupid," she shot back. "I built a career on kindness, on bringing people together. Trump's the one tearing everything apart, and you're cheering him on like some brainwashed cheerleader." Clara Holt tried to interject, her voice calm but firm. "Let's keep this civil, ladies," but her words were drowned out by Karoline's next salvo. "Kindness?" Karoline scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "Your whole be kind shtick was a lie. You're a hypocrite who ran to some fancy villa in Europe while your so-called fans were left wondering why their hero ditched them. You're no better than the elites you claim to hate." The audience gasped, a ripple of shock spreading through the room. Ellen leaned forward now, her voice rising. "I didn't ditch anyone. I left because I couldn't breathe here, knowing what he stands for. You think I owe you an apology for that? You're the one shilling for a man who thrives on division." Karoline's smile was cold, predatory. "You're so full of it. You didn't leave for some noble cause. You left because you're weak. You couldn't handle a country that didn't bow to your liberal nonsense anymore. And now you're back. What, to play the victim? Pathetic." Ellen's hands clenched into fists, her knuckles white. The studio felt smaller, the walls closing in as the argument spiraled. The audience was riveted, their whispers fading into a tense silence. Clara Holt scribbled notes, her eyes darting between the two women, knowing this clash was television gold. "You want to talk pathetic?" Ellen said, her voice shaking with fury. "Look at you, Karoline. You're so desperate to stay relevant you'll lick the boots of anyone with power. You call me a coward, but you're the one hiding behind Trump's coattails, too scared to think for yourself." Karoline's face twisted, her composure cracking. "Don't you dare lecture me," she snapped. "I'm not the one who ran away. I stayed. I fought for what I believe in. You just whined and left. You're nothing but a washed-up has-been who thought she could escape her failures." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Ellen's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to look away. The studio was a pressure cooker, ready to explode. Clara Holt finally cut in, her voice sharp. "We'll take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. This is far from over." As the cameras panned back, the audience erupted into murmurs, their emotions a tangled mix of shock and excitement. Ellen and Karoline sat back, glaring at each other, neither willing to yield. The stage was set for a battle that would only grow uglier, and no one in the room could look away. Karoline Leavitt's smirk lingered as the studio lights dimmed for the break, but her eyes never left Ellen. The audience buzzed with nervous energy. their whispers a low hum that filled the tense silence. Ellen's chest heaved, her breath uneven as she fought to keep her composure. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Clara Holt, sensing the volatility, motioned for the crew to hurry. They had only minutes before the cameras rolled again, and the clash was far from finished. Ellen leaned back, her fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the chair. She wasn't here to lose. "You think you can bully me into silence?" she said, her voice low, meant only for Karoline. "I've faced worse than you." Karoline's laugh was sharp, cutting through the murmurs. "Oh, please. You're out of your league, Ellen. Keep talking and I'll bury you." She crossed her arms, her posture daring Ellen to make the next move. The audience caught the exchange, their heads swiveling between the two women. A man in the front row clutched his wife's hand, his face a mix of awe and unease. The room pulsed with anticipation, every eye locked on the stage. Clara Holt cleared her throat, signaling the end of the break. The cameras blinked red, and the fight roared back to life. "You call me a has-been," Ellen said, her voice steady now, slicing through the tension. "But let's talk about you, Karoline. You're nothing without Trump's name to prop you up. What's your plan when he's gone? You've got no substance, just a loud mouth and a bad attitude." Karoline's eyes flashed with fury. "Don't you dare talk about substance," she snapped. "I've built a career on truth, on calling out frauds like you. You're the one who's nothing, Ellen. Your little dance routines and fake smiles fooled people for years, but the mask is off now. Everyone sees you for the quitter you are." The audience stirred, some nodding in agreement, others shifting uncomfortably. Ellen's face hardened, but she didn't flinch. "Truth? You wouldn't? No truth if it slapped you. You twist everything to fit your narrative, just like your precious president. I left because I couldn't live in a place that celebrates lies. You stayed because you thrive on them." Karoline shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You sanctimonious fraud!" she shouted, pointing a finger at Ellen. "You didn't leave for truth. You left because you're too weak to face reality. America moved on without you and you couldn't stand it. So you ran to your little hideout, crying about how unfair it all is." Ellen stood too, her height giving her a slight edge as she glared down at Karoline. "Weak?" she said, her voice booming now. "I'm here, aren't I? I came back to face vultures like you. You think you're tough because you yell and insult people? You're a bully, Karoline, and bullies always crack when someone stands up to them." The audience erupted, some cheering, others gasping. Clara Holt raised a hand, trying to regain control, but the women ignored her. Karoline stepped closer, her face inches from Ellen's. "You're not standing up," she hissed. "You're just making noise. You're a coward who thought she could waltz back and be adored again. Newsflash, Ellen. Nobody cares about you anymore." Ellen's hands shook, but her voice was ice cold. "You're wrong. People care about honesty, about decency. That's why they're here watching. They're tired of people like you, shouting hate to drown out reason. You're not winning this, Karoline. You're just embarrassing yourself." The room felt like it was holding its breath. A woman in the back row wiped her eyes, moved by Ellen's words, while a man nearby muttered support for Karoline. The divide was palpable, the studio a battleground of ideals. Clara Holt finally broke through, her voice firm. "Enough! Sit down, both of you. We're moving to questions from the audience." As the women sat, their glares locked, the audience leaned forward, eager for more. The fight had reached a fever pitch, and the next move could tip the scales. Ellen's heart pounded, but she felt a spark of resolve. Karoline's confidence wavered just for a second, and Ellen saw it. The war wasn't over, but the tide was turning. A hush settled over the studio as Clara Holt turned to the audience, her clipboard clutched tightly. The tension between Ellen and Karoline still simmered, their glares like daggers across the stage. The crowd, A mix of gray-haired retirees and middle-aged fans sat on edge, their faces reflecting the raw emotion of the clash. The air felt heavy, charged with the weight of words yet to be spoken. Clara's voice cut through, steady but tinged with urgency. "We're opening the floor to questions," she said, scanning the raised hands. "Keep it sharp, and let's stay on topic." She pointed to a woman in the third row, her silver hair catching the light. "You, ma'am, go ahead." The woman stood, her voice trembling but clear. "Ellen, I admired you for years, but I felt betrayed when you left. Why didn't you stay and fight for what you believe in, like Karoline said?" The question hung like a challenge, and the audience leaned in, hungry for Ellen's response. Ellen's face softened, but her eyes burned. With conviction. "I hear you," she said, her voice steady. "Leaving wasn't easy. I felt like I was abandoning people who believed in me. But staying meant living in a place where division and anger were winning. I needed to step back, to find clarity. I'm back now, not to hide, but to stand up, even against people like her." She jerked her head toward Karoline, who scoffed loudly. Karoline didn't wait for Clara's permission. "Clarity?" she mocked, her voice dripping with scorn. "You mean you needed a vacation from reality? You left your fans high and dry, and now you're spinning this sob story to save face. You're a disgrace, Ellen, and you know it," the audience murmured, some nodding, others shaking their heads. Ellen's jaw clenched, but she kept her focus on the woman who'd asked the question. "I didn't leave to hurt anyone," she said. "I left to protect what I stand for. Kindness doesn't mean staying silent while hate takes over. Sometimes it means stepping away to come back stronger." Karoline rolled her eyes, her voice rising. "Stronger? You're delusional. You came back because you're desperate for attention. You couldn't stand being irrelevant, so you crawled back to beg for applause. It's pathetic, and these people deserve better than your excuses." A man in the audience stood, his face red with anger. "Karoline, enough!" he shouted, his voice booming. "You talk about truth, but all you do is attack. Ellen's trying to explain herself. Why don't you listen for once?" The crowd erupted, some cheering, others booing, the room splitting. Down the middle. Karoline whirled on him, her finger jabbing the air. "You think she's a saint? Wake up. She's a fraud who ran when things got tough. I'm the one calling it like it is, and you're too blind to see it." Her words were venomous, her face flushed with rage. Ellen seized the moment, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You're not calling anything, Karoline. You're just screaming to drown out anyone who disagrees with you. That's not truth. That's fear. You're scared of people who think for themselves, who don't bow to your hero in the White House." The audience roared, the sound a mix of support and outrage. Clara Holt raised both hands, her voice sharp. "Order, please. We're not done here." She pointed to a man in the back, his weathered face set in a scowl. "Sir, your question." The man's voice was gruff, directed at Karoline. "You keep saying Ellen's weak, but what makes you so strong? All I hear is you tearing her down. What do you stand for, besides hating people like her?" The question landed like a punch, and the crowd held its breath. Karoline's smile was tight, her confidence shaken. "I stand for a country that doesn't coddle quitters," she said, but her voice lacked its earlier fire. "I fight for people who stay, who work hard, who don't run off when things get messy. Unlike her." Ellen didn't hesitate. "You fight for yourself, Karoline. You tear people down to feel bigger. I'm here for the people who want hope, who want to believe in something better. That's why I came back, and that's why you'll never understand me." The studio vibrated with emotion, the audience caught in the crossfire of ideals. Karoline's hands gripped her chair, her knuckles white, while Ellen sat tall, her resolve unshaken. Clara Holt glanced at the clock, knowing the segment was nearing its end. The battle had shifted, and the final moments would decide who walked away victorious. The studio pulsed with raw energy, the audience's emotions swirling like a storm ready to break. Ellen sat with her chin raised, her eyes locked on Karoline, who gripped her chair as if anchoring herself against the tide of Ellen's words. The crowd's earlier murmurs had grown into a restless hum, their faces a mix of awe, anger, and anticipation. Clara Holt, her composure fraying, scanned the room for the next question, determined to keep the segment from spiraling into chaos. A woman near the front stood, her voice sharp with conviction. "Ellen, you talk about hope, but how can we trust you after you left us? And Karoline, why should we listen to someone who just attacks instead of offering solutions?" The double-barreled question drew gasps, the audience leaning forward, eager for the response. Karoline struck first, her voice a low growl. "Trust her? You can't. She's a deserter who thinks a few pretty words will erase her betrayal. As for me, I'm here to expose liars like her, to remind people what strength looks like. I don't need to coddle you with fake promises. I tell it straight." Ellen's laugh was short, biting. "Straight? You twist everything to fit your venom. You don't offer solutions, Karoline. You just point fingers and yell. People are tired of that. They want someone who lifts them up, not tears them down." She turned to the woman who'd asked. "I know I hurt people by leaving. I carry that every day. But I'm back to rebuild trust, to show I'm still fighting for what's right." Karoline's face twisted with contempt. "Rebuild trust? You're a joke. You think you can waltz in. Here, play the martyr, and everyone will fall at your feet. These people aren't your puppets, Ellen. They see through your act." She leaned forward, her voice a hiss. "You're done, and you know it." The audience stirred, some shouting support for Ellen, others clapping for Karoline. A man in the middle stood, his voice booming. "Karoline, you're all talk. Ellen's at least trying to make things right. What have you done except scream at her?" The crowd roared, the divide deepening, the studio a cauldron of clashing loyalties. Karoline's eyes blazed, but her voice cracked slightly. "I've done more for this country than she ever will. I stayed when cowards like her ran. I speak for people who are sick of her kind, her fake tears, her empty promises." She pointed at Ellen, her hand shaking. "You're a relic, Ellen. Nobody needs you anymore." Ellen rose, her presence commanding the room. "You're wrong," she said, her voice clear, unwavering. "People need hope, not your hate. They need someone who believes in them, not someone who belittles them. I left, yes, but I came back to fight for that. You're just fighting to be heard, and it's not working." The audience erupted, cheers drowning out the boos. "Clara." Holt waved her hands, her voice strained. "One more question, then we wrap this up." She pointed to an older man, his face lined with years of hard work. "Sir, go ahead." The man's voice was steady, his words deliberate. "Ellen, I voted for Trump. I don't agree with you, but I respect that you're here, facing this. Karoline, why do you need to tear her down to make your point? Can't you stand on your own?" The question silenced the room, the weight of it settling over everyone. Karoline's smile was forced, her confidence unraveling. "I'm not tearing her down," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm holding her accountable. She doesn't get a free pass just because she's Ellen DeGeneres." Ellen seized the moment, her voice ringing with quiet power. "Accountability isn't screaming insults, Karoline. It's showing up, owning your mistakes, and doing better. I'm doing that. You're just hiding behind your anger, and it's sad." She turned to the man. "We don't have to agree, sir, but we can respect each other. That's what I'm here for." The studio shook with applause, the sound swelling like a wave. Karoline's face paled, her hands trembling as she sat back. Clara Holt stood, her voice cutting through the noise. "We're out of time, but this has been unforgettable. Thank you both." The cameras panned across the audience, capturing their rapt faces, their emotions raw and unguarded. Ellen's heart pounded, but she felt lighter, stronger. Karoline stared at the floor, her fire dimmed. The battle was nearing its end, and the outcome was clear. The studio vibrated with the echo of applause, a tidal wave of sound that seemed to lift Ellen DeGeneres as she stood tall, her eyes bright with defiance. Karoline Leavitt slumped slightly in her chair, her earlier bravado reduced to a flicker. The audience, their faces flushed with emotion, remained riveted, sensing the clash had reached its peak. Clara Holt, her clipboard forgotten, stepped to the center, her voice steady but charged with the weight of the moment. "We've heard enough to know where you both stand," Clara said, her gaze shifting between the two women. "But before we close, each of you gets one final statement. No interruptions. Ellen, you first." Ellen took a deep breath, her voice clear and resonant. "I came back because I believe in people, in their goodness, in their ability to rise above division. I left when the air felt too heavy to breathe, but I never stopped caring. I'm here now, not for applause, but to rebuild what I broke, to remind everyone that kindness isn't weakness. It's strength. And no one, not even you, Karoline, can take that from me." The audience erupted, their cheers a wall of sound. A woman in the front row clapped fiercely, her eyes wet with pride, while a man nearby nodded, his skepticism softened. Karoline's jaw tightened, her hands clenched in her lap, but she said nothing, her silence louder than any retort. Clara turned to her. "Karoline, your turn." Karoline stood, her posture rigid, her voice strained but sharp. "I'm not here to coddle anyone. I speak for those who stayed, who fought, who didn't run when things got tough. Ellen's a quitter who thinks she can charm her way back. She's wrong. America doesn't need her fake smiles or empty promises. It needs people like me who tell the truth, no matter how ugly." The response was mixed, some clapping, others murmuring disapproval. A man in the back shook his head, whispering to his neighbor, while a woman nearby shouted, "Sit down, Karoline." The room felt like a live wire, sparking with every word. Ellen didn't flinch, her gaze steady on Karoline. The audience sensed the shift, the moment when one fighter stands taller than the other. Clara raised a hand, her voice cutting through the noise. "That's it, folks. You've heard their hearts. Now it's up to you to decide who's right." As the cameras panned back, Ellen stepped forward, addressing the crowd directly. "You don't have to agree with me," she said, her voice warm but firm. "But you deserve better than anger and insults. You deserve hope, respect, a reason to believe tomorrow can be better. That's what I'm fighting for, and I won't stop." The applause was deafening, a roar that shook the studio walls. Karoline's face twitched, her eyes darting to the crowd, searching for support that wasn't there. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her fire snuffed out. The audience's energy surged toward Ellen, their cheers a testament to her resilience. "Clara." Holt moved to wrap up, her smile genuine. "Thank you, Ellen, Karoline, and all of you for being here. This is why we do this, to hear truth, to feel passion, to find a way forward. Good night." The lights dimmed, but the audience lingered, their voices a buzz of excitement. Ellen walked off stage, her head high, a weight lifted from her shoulders. She'd faced the storm and emerged stronger, her purpose clear. Karoline trailed behind, her steps heavy, her confidence shattered. The crew whispered among themselves, already predicting the segment's viral spread. In the green room, Ellen paused, catching her reflection in a mirror. She saw not just the woman who'd left, but the one who'd returned, ready to fight for what mattered. The audience's cheers echoed in her mind, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Karoline, meanwhile, slipped out a side exit, her silence a concession she'd never voice. The studio emptied, but the energy lingered, a spark that would ignite conversations for weeks. Ellen had won, not just the argument, but the hearts of those who'd watched. Her triumph was complete, a beacon of hope in a divided world, and she carried it forward, unbroken.